heartbeat. We have about 50 minutes before you get here. Look at Mom. Mom's a little thirsty.
Very thirsty.
Are you nervous?
I'm getting there. Getting tired too. That video was just about an hour before my baby was born. So rewind a few months in preparation for my C-section. We went to Cincinnati Children's Hospital, which is where we do go once a year for checkups. But we went about in March to talk to them to prepare for my C-section. So this my group of doctors has never had a patient with SMA have a baby. So I was their first patient to have a baby. There was another group of doctors that had their patient with SMA have a baby about 13 years before this. So I am the first one in over 13 years to be a patient with SMA and have a baby. So I met with my pulmonologist, and he did some testing while I was pregnant, and of course my breathing levels were lower than normal, but that was normal because I had a baby pushing on my lungs. So he talked to us about all the possibilities that could happen while I was in surgery. He didn't think that there was going to be any reason that I would need a breathing tube during my surgery, but he wanted me to be aware that that was a possibility. He did say that he wanted to call my doctor so that they could talk through any possibilities and any issues I could possibly have with my breathing during surgery. So he gave me, my husband, my parents, and my doctor his cell phone number if anything came up during my C-section. So we thought that was pretty wonderful that he was that caring that he gave us all his personal cell phone. So then about a month after that, I did meet with the anesthesiologist that would be in surgery with me. I had back surgery, spinal fusion surgery about 13 years ago. So I have rods in my back, and my back is fused together, pretty much my whole back. So I wanted to attempt an epidural because that way my husband would be able to be in the room during the C-section. Otherwise, I would have to be put to sleep and they wouldn't let my husband be in the room. So I wanted to attempt an epidural so that my husband would have the opportunity to witness the birth of his son. So I had to get back x-rays, and then I met with the anesthesiologist to see if it would be possible to try an epidural. He looked over the x-rays, he looked at my back, felt my back, and he said that he would be willing to attempt an epidural the morning of. So that was pretty exciting news. So then on June 27th, 2018, we had to be at the hospital at 5:30 in the morning to prepare for my C-section. We were scheduled to have the C-section at 8:30 that morning. So we go up to the pre-op room. I get settled into the hospital bed. They hook me up to an IV and a catheter, and I just gotta say, that catheter was wonderful. I got to drink as much as I possibly wanted without ever having to get out of bed to go to the bathroom. It was amazing. And I did drink a lot. Whenever I was pregnant, I was very thirsty through my whole pregnancy. So I was able to drink as much as I want before and shortly after the C-section without ever having to get out of bed. So after I was all hooked up and settled in, Dustin had to take my chair back down to the van because I was in a pretty small pre-op room and they didn't want my wheelchair getting in the way of anything. So Dustin had to take my wheelchair back down to the van and then come back up, and then we waited. So my C-section was scheduled for 8:30. So they had told me that there were some emergency C-sections that had come up that morning, and so mine was going to be pushed back. So then the shakes started to happen. I don't know why it happens, but every friend that I talked to that have gone through birth said that they got the shakes too. And I'm not just talking about shaking. I mean, we were just like, I was jerking and uncontrollably jerking and shaking. I have no idea why. So the anesthesiologist came back in that morning and he had me sit up on the edge of the bed and he felt around and marked on my back where he was going to attempt the epidural. He wasn't going to attempt the epidural until I got back into the operating room, but he wanted to mark it so that he wasn't taking up time in the operating room trying to figure out where he was going to place the needle. Then my doctor did come in and check in on me, see how things were going, told me that she had another C-section coming up, so mine was going to hopefully only be pushed back an hour. So about 8 o'clock in the morning, I started to have contractions, and they were pretty intense. So they were, the closest together that we could count was that they were 8 minutes apart. So then a little after 9, the anesthesiologist came back in to say that he was ready to take me down to the operating room and give me my epidural and so that we could have this baby. However, talking it over with my husband before he came back in, we had decided that we were just ready for our baby to be here. I didn't want to take any more time trying to place the needle, attempting an epidural that wasn't even guaranteed, and I was hurting pretty bad from the contractions. So we told the anesthesiologist that I didn't want to try an epidural anymore. I just wanted to go be put under and have my baby. So then about 9:20-ish, they took me back and they transferred me over to the operating table. They do strap down your arms, and I was still shaking uncontrollably, so they strapped down my arms. He did put a mask over my face just for some oxygen while they waited for the doctor to come in. So once the doctor came in, she greeted me, said that she was going to be starting very soon, as soon as she got her gloves on. So then they switched the oxygen over to the sleeping medicine. I can't think of what it's called. So then he put the mask over my face and I was starting to doze, and I could feel my doctor pushing on my stomach, and she apparently was drawing a line on where she wanted to make the incision. I thought the pin felt awfully sharp, so the anesthesiologist pulled the mask off, said, "How are you doing? Are you feeling it?" And I said, "Oh, I'm starting to feel it, but I'm not asleep yet, so don't start cutting." So he kind of giggled and he reassured me that they were not going to cut until I was fully asleep. So he put the mask back and I was out within seconds. So then I wake up and I'm back in my pre-op room and my baby's in my arms. So Levi Robert Perkins was born at 9:33 a.m. He was 5 pounds, 15 ounces, and 19 inches long. After they had started the C-section surgery, he was born within 5 minutes, and I was out of surgery within 20. So for the 10 to 15 minutes between him being born and me being brought back to the room, he was taken to the nursery. So my husband, who had to stay back, unfortunately, in the pre-op room during my C-section, he did get to go across the hall to the nursery and see his son for the first time. He didn't get to hold him because they wanted me to do skin to skin and be the first to hold the baby, but he did get to take pictures with him and just be with his son for the first time. So then whenever they brought me back to the pre-op room, I did skin to skin right away, and we got to have about 2 hours where it was just the 3 of us and our little family got to bond. So after those 2 hours, the first set of grandparents were able to come up and see the baby for the first time. So Dustin's parents came first, and they got to stay for about 30 to 45 minutes, take pictures, hold him for the first time, and then they had to leave to make room for my parents to come up and visit. So then my parents came up and they got to see Levi for the first time, and shortly after they came up, the nurse had said that I was able to move over to the maternity rooms. So I had to go down the hall a little bit to where I was going to be for the next 2 nights. So I did have to stay in the hospital 3 days and 2 nights, which is typical after a C-section, and it seems that is the norm for after birth too. So I did decide to nurse my baby, so I had lactation specialists coming in and helping me with that over the next few days. I had nurses coming and checking on me. So I had decided to stop the morphine about 4 hours after having surgery so that I could not be connected to an IV anymore. And so then the next morning, I was able to get up in my wheelchair for the first time since surgery, and I was not connected to anything, so I could comfortably sit in my chair, attempt to nurse my baby, and have visitors come, and I'm just so much more comfortable in my wheelchair versus laying in a hospital bed. So then we got to leave on a Friday. My C-section was on a Wednesday. We were released from the hospital on Friday. My doctor came to visit us before we left, and she had told me since I had a pretty major surgery and since I do sit all the time, I'm more susceptible to blood clots. So she wanted me to have a mild blood thinner. And the way she wanted me to have this blood thinner was through a shot for the next 4 weeks. So before we were released, a nurse brought a shot up so that she could teach my husband and my mom how to give me the shot, because they were going to have to be the ones to do it for the next 4 weeks. So it was given in my stomach the same time every day. I will say those shots were the worst part of the whole experience, because by the end of the 4 weeks my stomach was pretty bruised up and the medicine burned whenever it was injected. So we were released from the hospital on a Friday a little bit after lunchtime, and I will say the weirdest feeling of everything was when the nurse walks us downstairs to the door and she just lets us leave with a baby by ourselves. But we got home, we got settled in, and it was just amazing having our brand new son at home, just the 3 of us. And I will talk about early motherhood in my next video. I will say my C-section, the whole surgery, really was not bad. I hated being put to sleep, but it was all fine. So be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.